We are here for the broader student outcome session, and I am incredibly excited about both the enthusiasm in this room, the number of you here, as well as the enthusiasm in the broader sector about this topic and about students' affective experiences in the classroom every day. I was a New York City 2005 core member, go New York, Brooklyn. I was also the founding executive director of Teach for America Washington, go Washington. And I'm now a program officer at the Rakes Foundation, where we focus on education, out-of-school time programs, and preventing youth and young adult homelessness. I'm also a mom of a first grader in a school in Seattle Public Schools that has had 4 principals in 6 years, is consistently in the bottom 3 elementary schools in the district, and I every day send him knowing that he needs to be known, loved, and supported, in addition to held to the highest of academic standards. So this is personally important to me as well. I'll pass it over to Itai so he can introduce himself.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, I know we just had lunch, but the cookies were good, so the sugar should be kicking in by now. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. My name is Itai Denor. I get the pleasure of working with the Einhorn Family Charitable Trust and partnering with Teach for America on this great work of broader student outcomes, including this panel today. I spent 12 years with City Year, a sister organization to Teach for America, helping to launch the New York office and a variety of other roles. And I also am a dad of 3 young girls, the oldest of which has just started kindergarten, and it makes this work that much more real of what it looks like to actually embed this, whatever you want to call this, and we'll hear different versions of that, into the academic content of how kids learn and develop. We have today an embarrassment of riches of experts on stage and experts in the audience. We want to hear from all of you. And so the way we're going to do that is, if you're on Twitter, you can use the hashtag TFABSO, and of course also the TFA25 to share with the broader. You can share with us your questions, your comments. If you are not on Twitter, you can text, and there's directions here on how to do that. Text TFA1 to 22333 to join the session. You'll receive a confirmation. The reason we're doing it through technology, just with all of you, all of these chairs eventually will be filled. For the sake of expediency, we will be able to aggregate all of those questions and make sure at the end of our conversation to reflect on the key questions that we've been hearing with our panelists and all of you. And it also allows us to continue the conversation outside of the room as well.
Great. And from our pre-conference survey, it was clear that you all want to take action. You want concrete things that you can bring back into your classrooms, into your schools, into your organizations and communities. And we want to make sure that those are research-based illustrations of this work, so that we are giving our students the access to the best of the best here. And so we are going to actually start by situating this conversation in a framework developed at the University of Chicago called the Foundations for Young Adult Success. And what I like about this framework is that it does a good job of integrating all of the aspects that our students bring to school every single day. It talks about their values, their identity, their competencies, as well as the skills that they need in order to be successful academically and beyond. It also talks about the importance of reflection for students. I think this framework is also very exciting because it breaks it down developmentally. We know that kindergartners need something very different than 12th graders, for example, and this does a really good job of doing that. It also, I think, allows us to have conversations about equity. Which kids are getting access to these kinds of supports, which kids are not. I will not bore you with my voice anymore, but I'm going to turn it over to Camille Farrington, one of the authors of this framework, and she'll kind of walk us through and situate our conversation today.
Putting my timer on because I got to go fast here. So this work was initially conceptualized. We were supposed to do a research review and talk to expert researchers, practitioners in a wide variety of fields: education, neuroscience, workforce development, youth development, to understand the foundations initially for college and career success. But right away we kind of said, well, this, and this was a project supported by the Wallace Foundation that we did over a period of about a year and a half. And right away we said, well, we have to really expand this notion of success beyond just college and career, and that in the 21st century it's not enough to just prepare kids to kind of slot them in to the economic system, but that we need young people who can take on the challenges, the global and local community challenges, whether we're talking about global warming or violent conflicts or just massive inequality, that we need people who can be critical thinkers, who can maintain healthy, happy relationships with other people, and who can make a change in the world. And so we started with that definition of success. So we're talking about civic engagement, health, friends, family, education, and work as this broad picture, and we have a very explicit equity and access lens on that. So as I said, it's not enough just to slot people into the current system, but to give, how do we develop young people with the tools and the skills to change that system and to create a better system, a better world, better communities, healthy families. And equity also means that different people might need slightly different things, in the sense that kids need the skills to navigate under-resourced and neglected neighborhoods and the dangers that rise up from that. Other kids need ways of recognizing their own privilege and the patterns that perpetuate that. So all of these things require a much more robust idea of success. And also, as Lindsay said, access to opportunities to develop all these tools and skills so that they can be effective in adulthood. So across all of this, both literature review and then talking to experts around the country, we started kind of backwards map, like what are the things that young people would need for us to feel like they're gonna make it? Like this one, we did well, they're gonna make it, you know, what does that mean? And there were three things that really came to the fore in all of our research and conversations. First is this, a solid set of competencies. You have to be a capable person, you have to be a competent person, you have to know how to do stuff and be effective in the world. So a broad set of competencies. Agency, the idea that you can control your destiny, but not in a, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of way, but more that you can see realistically the challenges and the obstacles in front of you, and you can make choices for your life in face of those challenges and obstacles to pursue your visions and the goals you have for yourself and your community. And thirdly, this idea of an integrated identity. And we all have lots of different social roles and social identities, and sometimes, and particularly for kids that are not kind of mainstream middle-class white kids, that oftentimes those identities conflict with other identities they might want to pursue. And so integrated identity means that you're able to bring all parts of yourself together in a way that allows you to move forward powerfully and not puts you at different parts of yourself at odds with each other as you're trying to move forward. So if we hold this up as the goals of our collective work, if we think of from early childhood through K-12 education, that ultimately what we're trying to develop are these three things, young people who are equipped with these three things. And so then the question comes, well, how do you get there? What makes that possible? And so within that outer ring, we have four what we call foundational components. And these are things that develop from birth, really, through your whole life. But in the kind of early childhood through high school space, it's really important that we're paying attention to not just knowledge and skills, but this whole broad array of things. And so it starts with self-regulation, which is, you know, simply the ability to recognize and direct your own behaviors and thoughts and feelings and emotions, as well as your attention, your kind of cognitive focus, to be able to do the things you want and need to do. Knowledge and skills, and now all of these things in the middle, we can think of them in kind of three three parts: self, others, and world. And so for knowledge and skills, you can have knowledge about yourself, you can have knowledge about your family history, your personal history, your likes and dislikes. You can have knowledge about other people and skills for relating to other people, to be able to support and build positive relationships. And then you can have knowledge and skills about the broader world, which includes all of the academic knowledge, but as well, so, how does the world work? What's the history of things? How did we get to where we are? As well as kind of cultural knowledge, institutional knowledge, how do I navigate systems? All of that would be in this knowledge and skills piece. Mindsets is, and we've done at the University of Chicago previous work on this, that basically we're talking about how do you perceive your environment? What's the frame through which you experience the world? And again, that could be how do you experience yourself? What do you think you're capable of in terms of self-efficacy and what you're good at, what you aren't good at, and can you grow? Can you get better at things? Mindsets around other people, how do they see us and how do we belong and fit in with them? And we have kind of presupposed ideas about that might either help us or get in our way. And likewise, mindsets about the world. What kind of place is this that we live in? Is it a harsh and cruel place and we have to protect ourselves and be in defense mode all the time? Or is it a place where could be a welcoming place and allow us to do things? So mindsets of openness and optimism help kids and help all of us kind of move through the world. And then finally, this notion of values. And again, these can be personal values. What do I stand for? What do I care about? What's meaningful and important to me? As well as what kind of world do I want to create? What kind of community do I want to create with the people around me? And what do I want to work for? What's the purpose of my life? And now all of these things are, as I say, developing from early childhood all the way up throughout our lives, and they support, and the interaction between them supports our ability to develop agency, integrated identity, and competencies. So the question of how do we develop these things, and in the report we have a chapter on developmental experiences where we have found particular things that kids need the opportunity to do in order to develop into the people that we hope that they can become. And so these experiences we've divided into action and reflection experiences. John Dewey famously said that people don't learn through experience, they learn through reflecting on experience. So we need both the opportunity to act and then the opportunity to reflect on things we do and see. So on the action side, young people need opportunities to encounter new things, to tinker and play around with stuff, to make choices, to practice and develop skills and competence, and to contribute to something meaningful and important in the world. And that's true from little teeny kids up all the way through our lives, that we need these action opportunities on a regular basis. And reflection opportunities include describing what happened, what you feel, what you see, evaluating if things, how did that go? How might I do it differently? With, some also value judgment around things. Was that right or wrong, how that's going down? Is this something I want to disrupt? To make connections between things you know and care about and other things, connecting different, what happened to you to other pieces of your life. Being able to envision your future as well as the future you hope for your community and for the world. And finally, being able to integrate these various pieces into who you are and to move from, I'm somebody who did that, to I'm the kind of person who acts in this way. So collectively, these are really critical pieces, and they take place in the context of developmental relationships with adults and mentors and the role of adults here is both to set up the opportunities for these experiences, as well as to be there to help kind of mediate young people's thinking and engage with them in conversation as they make meaning and make sense of their world. And So collectively, it's through these action and reflection experiences that knowledge, mindsets, values, self-regulation are developed and lead towards this outer picture of agency, integrated identity, and a set of competencies. So.
Thanks, Camille. What I love about the framework is that it takes a lot of the research that's been done to date, a lot of the work of other frameworks, and brings it together in a way that is actionable. And we're going to complement our time today with 6 experts who are really going to focus their time on small examples of how what this could look like in a classroom or in the lives of young people. And then in between each of them, we're going to ask Camille to sort of elevate us back up to 30,000 feet to the framework and to comment on how this applies. Throughout all of this, we will have the opportunity to hear your thoughts and your questions through the Twitter feed and through the texting that we referenced earlier, TFABSO, hashtag TFABSO for the Twitter feed. And that's how we'll be able to continue in this conversation. And I also want to reference that in the app for this event, there are 2 resource documents. One, a 2-page document on the actual framework that you can see. And so as you're listening to our great panelists, you can follow along and sort of compare their notes against the framework. And then a broader list of resources, both from our panelist organizations, but also from other organizations that we thought you all could benefit from as well. So without any further ado, let me quickly introduce our esteemed experts and panelists who will share their insights. From Mindful Schools, we have educator and author Betsy Hanger. From the University of Pennsylvania's Character Lab, we have Dr. Jen Charlo. From the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and a 2006 New York City TFA alum, Dr. Dina Simmons. From Facing History and Ourselves, Mr. Steve Becton. From the Navajo Nation's Department of Dine Education, Dr. Calvin White. And from the University of Virginia, Dr. Tish Jennings. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Betsy Hanger. Thank you, Betsy.
Thanks, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Not in the back? Thanks. So, yes, Mindful Schools. Can I have the first slide? So Mindful Schools started in 2007 in just a few under-resourced schools in Oakland, California. And today we have reached over 300,000 students, and we're in over 60 countries. We offer a really vibrant network of over 10,000 educators, administrators, school psychologists, parents, who all believe that mindfulness is a great way to provide a foundation for the kind of social and emotional outcomes that Dr. Farrington has outlined and that you're going to be hearing from the rest of the panelists today. What works about the Mindful Schools idea is that the courses are offered in mindfulness for teachers, parents, and new meditators online. And afterwards, a peer-to-peer network gets developed. Maybe you go into a new city like Washington, D.C., and you meet a colleague who works in the New York City public school system, as just happened to me. Mindful Schools reaches that broad. What we offer is practical skills for teachers and for youth. Self-care, first of all, and facilitation with youth and how to connect with them with more empathy and awareness. These are really simple and effective practices, research-based, and they require little demand on the school day. The programs are all organic. They're specific to the individual environment and to the cultural milieu in which they grow. So our view of competency is that a mindful teacher practices mindfulness, and we're all going to practice in just a minute. And then through practicing mindfulness, you can learn how to teach mindfulness and model it. Can I have the next slide? So the Foundations for Young Adult Success defines awareness as being conscious of the self and one's surroundings and learning to focus our attention on purpose. And that is indeed the first step in our ability to self-regulate. In Mindful Schools, we teach and guide our students and our teachers to first look quietly within, and then interactively at the present moment. So right now, in a series of guided and active reflections, because we have a deep trust that if we can develop the skill of non-judgmental relationship to the self, in other words, staying open and curious to our experience on purpose, that organically we will develop understanding of ourselves and others and our world, compassion for ourselves and others and our world, and a natural wisdom will arise. So we try to replace presumption and assumption moment to moment with openness and curiosity, and then empathy can arise, and a beautiful classroom community, faculty meeting community, school board community can be created. In other words, we allow our experience to be, and that way we can be a little bit more honest about our feelings. Our students can tell us more honestly who they are and what they know, and our relationships can flourish. Just a reference, John Kabat-Zinn, who's the founder of modern secular mindfulness, defines mindfulness practice as a rotation in consciousness, with its most important benefit being a boost in awareness. And as I've tried to suggest from this, awareness goes much deeper than you might think on the surface. He says awareness, quote, allows us to see and realize that we're seeing, to think, and to know what's on our minds, and to experience emotion and be in relationship to it in a way that's actually wise and self-compassionate. It doesn't saddle us with stories of how great we are, or how horrible we are, or how inadequate we are. Such narratives can act like cement boots that sink us in a morass, more or less of our own creation. That is, if we believe them, if we think they are the truth, rather than recognizing them as mere thoughts coming and going. So with that challenge, and with the glacier in mind, Andrew Mandel has invited me to lead you in a brief practice. So I'm going to invite you to notice if your feet are on the ground, and if they're not, put your feet on the ground. I'm going to invite you to turn over your devices for just a moment, and lots of you are sitting up already like you're curious about what's about to happen. That's marvelous. My fourth graders have to be reminded. And if you have something in your hands, consider turning that over and letting them go. And if you feel comfortable, close your eyes or look down at your hands. And just take a moment for yourself to feel what it's like to be in this room. And now notice anything you can about your own body. How do you feel in this moment, being in your body? Perhaps you can feel your heartbeat or feel your breathing. So moment by moment, I invite you to keep on noticing, developing that openness and curiosity. Thoughts may be racing through your mind or floating. Whatever's going on for you, just bring into the foreground a few more mindful breaths. And now gently and slowly, noticing if anything has shifted for you, come slowly back into the room. So that kind of mindfulness practice is how we start in mindful schools to develop a whole series of social emotional learning experiences that are interactive. And I want to show you in the next slide just a couple of examples of journals from my students in East Los Angeles, a very under-resourced area of unincorporated Los Angeles County. Any East LA people here? Great. I feel more at home already. So here's Ian. Ian is autistic and had an aide and had never spoken in class. When I met him, he was in 4th grade, and he was introverted to the max. When Ian noticed other kids practicing mindfulness, he sank into the experience like somebody diving into bed at night. And his wonderful picture in his journal was really about the relaxation that he started to experience for the first time in class. And by the end of that school year, Ian had started to buddy up with some of the guys when he went out onto the playground and started to talk. Can I have the next slide? So I don't know if you can see this. It's a marvelous picture by a 5th grader named Yvette. And Yvette, when she was experiencing the mindfulness of her body, body scans, noticing her breath throughout the day, she began to really settle down in class. And when we got to the experiences of metacognition, of thinking about our thinking, Yvette noticed that she was having a lot of obsessive thoughts, and she expresses it very well here. She says, it feels weird because I think the same thought over and over. I had often experienced Yvette as being somebody who was daydreaming in class, and what happened once she got the skill of metacognition through mindfulness, she began to be able to apply it throughout the day and notice where her mind was, whether it was looping through the same frightened thought or whether she was able to redirect herself and be back in class. She used the action, reflection, action piece of mindfulness to really bring herself into the classroom in a very powerful way. Next slide. So this is by a wonderful young woman named Jade. When I met Jade, she was tiny in 4th grade, and she never smiled, and I noticed that right away, and I went to the teacher in whose class I was offering mindfulness, and I said, tell me about Jade. And it turned out that after Jade had been practicing 3 kind wishes in class, which is a compassion, gratitude moment that we do together with students leading at the end of every session, Jade disclosed that in fact her baby sister had died that summer, and her mother had forbidden her to tell the school. Once this was in her journal and she started to talk about visiting the grave every weekend, she was able to start to cry in school and feel safer. And so Jade was able to come into her classroom feeling more comfortable with who she really was in that moment. Final slide. So a Mindful Schools trained teacher, administrator, school board member is a person who puts at the forefront the use of the skills of empathy and inclusiveness and perceptiveness to be culturally responsive to what they see right in front of them. Every class that practices mindfulness is going to look different because through mindfulness we learn to be flexible and, in the marvelous words of the framework, to tinker.
Thank you, Betsy. That's a very, very rich example of action and reflection, and particularly the action of encounter our own thoughts, encounter just the space that we are in this moment, and then reflect upon that. And you see through that process, and also the reflection activity of describe what you feel. So the last little girl who talked about I felt lonely, the earlier girl who talked about it felt weird to have all these things going on in my mind. So just to be able to put words to your experience is how we grow and develop. And that the specific aspects of the framework that I see happening there is obviously self-regulation, being able to kind of control your thoughts or direct your thoughts and your attention. Mindsets of openness to new experience and openness to just letting things be, as well as the mindset of these are just thoughts. It's not like something I need to respond to. So it's a shift in a mindset for young people. And finally, for the last little girl, the idea of integrated identity, where she had this experience in her family of a profound loss of her little sister, but then in her school life she wasn't supposed to talk about that. And so her ability to, through this action and reflection cycle, to bring those two things together. So I think there are all kinds of really great examples in that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Camille. Hello? Is it on? Oh, you can hear me. Okay. Thanks, Camille. Let's build on this concept of self-regulation and hear from Dr. Jen Charlot about self-regulation, self-management, goal setting, and goal attainment.
Thanks, Lindsay. Hi, everybody. Hello. My name is Jen, as Lindsay said. I work for a nonprofit organization in Philadelphia called the Character Lab, and we try to take research and make it into practical tools and resources for teachers to use. Like, great, right? Like, maybe I can actually read intervention from a research paper and as a teacher use it in my classroom, and so that's what we do at Character Lab. Raise your hand if you have ever wanted to do something, write that lesson plan, finish that unit, go to the gym, and you just actually couldn't get yourself to do that. Yeah, that's pretty much every single person in this room. One of the strategies that Character Lab has doubled down on over the last year is a strategy called WHOOP. It's developed by Dr. Gabrielle Ottingen. She works out of NYU. And it is a self-regulation, motivation, goal attainment strategy. I started out as a middle school social worker in the Bronx, and one of the things that I always wanted to do with my sixth graders was set goals. And I didn't have the right strategy to do that. And so when I first started working at Character Lab, I was introduced to WHOOP, which I really liked because it was an official process for me to go through to help students find what they really wanted to achieve and then build a plan for how to get there. So WHOOP stands for Wish, Outcome, Obstacle, and Plan. 4 steps. Sounds simple, feels simple. In some ways it is. I'm gonna talk to you about the little nuances now. So it's not any wish, right? No one can give you the wish. So as an educator, sometimes I really wanted to give my students wishes, right? Like, don't you really want to finish this homework? You really want to do this homework, don't you? And that's just not the way WHOOP works. WHOOP has to be something, the wish has to be something that you really want as an individual, has to be challenging and feasible. The outcome. The outcome is a part of the process that is the best result of accomplishing your wish, right? Like, what's the best possible feeling that you would have? The best thing that would happen in the world, in your family, in your community, if your wish for yourself, like if your wish came true. And in the outcome section, it's really important to imagine it, right? So that's one of the nuances that I mentioned earlier. It's really important to imagine the outcome as you're going through this process. The obstacle is also really important. A lot of goal-setting strategies miss out on this piece, which is, what's the obstacle that's standing in your way? And it's not any obstacle, right? Like, oh, my mom was talking really loud on the phone, so I couldn't actually do my homework. No, right? Because that's an external obstacle. The obstacle has to be internal. Like, what is it inside of you that is stopping you from accomplishing this wish? And so that's a really important nuance about this process. It has to be an internal obstacle for yourself. And again, you have to imagine this part as you're going through the process. The last piece is the plan. What's the plan to overcome the obstacle, right? So once you identify what's standing in your way, what action, what's the one effective action that you're gonna take to be able to overcome that obstacle? And what's important about this plan, this is often where people do the process incorrectly, is that they formulate the plan incorrectly. So the plan has to go, if your obstacle, then your effective action. Remember, it's a plan to overcome the obstacle. All right, so I just explained this process to you. And I'm gonna actually try to lead all 1,200 people sitting in this audience through this process. Betsy was kind enough to get you in the mindfulness mind space. So I'm gonna try again. I'd like you to try to get comfortable. It's been a long day. You've been listening and talking a lot, probably. So just let all of that go. The next few minutes are just for you. Take a deep breath. And just let everything go on the exhale. So what's one wish that you have that you really want to achieve in the next 24 hours? Something you really want for yourself in the next 24 hours. Challenging but feasible. Could be about the conference, your personal life. One small thing. And if you got that wish accomplished, what would be the best outcome? What would be happening? How would it feel? Now hold that in your mind and imagine it. Now, what is one obstacle standing in your way? One obstacle inside of you. What are you doing or not doing? What are you thinking or not thinking that is standing in the way of accomplishing your wish? One obstacle. Hold that in your mind and imagine it happening. What is one effective action that you could take to overcome that obstacle? One thing that you might be able to do to overcome that obstacle. Now I'd like you to repeat this plan with your obstacle and your action. So if your obstacle, then I will, what's your action? If, then I will, repeat it to yourself one more time. If, then I will. Now you can open your eyes and come back to the room. You've just completed the WHOOP process. Congratulations. In a room of this many people, sometimes it's really difficult to concentrate. If you can go back. You know, the WHOOP process, this process that I've just taken you through, it's been tested with adults for over 20 years in the health field, those looking for work. And Dr. Ottingen wanted to see whether or not it would work with middle schoolers, and when done with middle schoolers, you see an improvement in attendance and in grades. And so that's really exciting because a small strategy that takes 5 minutes to do could have impact that you really care about, like not only accomplishing your personal goals or whatever your goals are, but also academic aspects as well. We did that, so. The last thing I want to talk to you about and leave you with is about implementation, right? So we talked about this strategy. I walked you through it. There are tons of tools on the Character Lab website that will help you dig deeper into this. And so how could you use this in your setting in your classroom? Whoop's nice because you could do it anywhere. You could do it on the train. You could do it every day when you wake up in the morning. In classrooms, it's been done on one-on-one sessions if you have a setting that enables you to do that. Small advisory groups. My favorite is a charter school in the city, a science teacher who does it every week. She has her students go through the WOOP process and ask them, like, what's your wish for science this week? Right? Like, what do you want this week out of science? And they write it down on a postcard, and then they revisit it every day for the whole week and adjust it. Like, WOOP is a practice. The first few times I started doing it, it didn't work for me. And I had to keep adjusting it. And so she goes through and she adjusts it every day, and it takes her 2 minutes once students actually know the process. So there are a variety of ways that you can think about implementing a strategy such as this. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jen. And so here you see that, again, the action and reflection cycles, we were asked to choose something, choose our wish, to envision the outcome we wanted and envision the obstacles, and then to choose a plan. So those kind of developmental opportunities. And it's clearly moving towards agency, right? To be able to kind of imagine what it is you want to accomplish and find a way to do that. And it draws on that knowledge and skills piece because we're learning a skill, right? We're learning a strategy for how to self-regulate and to accomplish the goals that we want to accomplish. And I also like that, Jen, at the end that you talked about practicing to get good at it. You have to practice it to perfect it. And lastly, I don't know about you and your own personal WOOP experience, but for me, it was a mindset shift that I have to stop complaining about how much work I have to do and start thinking about like how grateful I am to be able to do all these wonderful things, right? And so when I get frustrated about the things I have to do, to make that shift in my way of thinking about it.
Great, thank you. So far 2 for 2 on practical things you can do yourselves or bring back for your students. We're going to keep going in that direction with our dear friend from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence.
How is everyone doing today? I'm supposed to ask that. I work at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. So we have our own approach to social emotional learning called Ruler. But before I go into Ruler, I wanted to give you an idea of why emotions. Why do we care about emotions? How many of you have experienced an emotion? That's exactly why. So we know that emotions influence our everyday life. So how many of you have been angry? Have you been able to pay attention when you're angry? Now consider our students, especially after recess. I used to tell my students to save their drama for their mamas when they came in with their drama from recess, but that's clearly probably not the best thing I could have done because they didn't have the skills to really regulate what they were feeling at the time. Our emotions also impact our decision making and our judgment. So oftentimes when we're hijacked and we're feeling a certain way that's unpleasant, especially or overly pleasant, it's very difficult to make a decision. We also find that people who are overly ambitious and excited and happy tend to say yes to everything. How many of you have overcommitted? Yes. Okay. So when you tend to be in a pleasant mood, you think you can do everything. You're probably not making the best decision about saying yes to everything. Also, emotions impact our relationship quality. We often like to be around people who have pleasant emotions. There's such a thing called an emotion contagion, and we like to be around people who are also pleasant. I'm also the queen of the distractions. There's a phone ringing, there's like a helicopter overview. But you know what, I'm regulating my emotions right now, and so I'm trying to stay with you. All right, so we also know that our emotions impact our physical and mental health. So emotionally skilled people are less likely to experience anxiety, depression, and a host of other mental health and physical health outcomes. And just in general, if you're able to regulate your emotions, you're going to experience more effectiveness and better performance. And so the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, what the hell is emotional intelligence? So the term emotional intelligence became popularized when Daniel Goleman wrote a book on emotional intelligence. But it was really in a small journal in 1990. Peter Salovey and Jack Mayer wrote a paper on emotional intelligence. And really, just to sum it up, decided, well, it's what we do with our emotions. And the way we talk about emotional intelligence at our center is using this acronym, RULER, and it's also the name of our approach to social and emotional learning. And RULER stands for the skills of emotional intelligence, and we believe that you can teach the skills of emotional intelligence. So recognizing emotions in ourselves and other people. So as I'm standing on stage, and I'm thankful that this platform is short and I can see over it, I can see your expressions. I'm looking at your facial expression to see, well, are they engaged? And as teachers, we want that sort of, to be able to read that in our students, to read their emotional state by looking at their facial expressions. We can also recognize emotions in our body, our physiology. Is your heart beating fast? Are my hands palmy? And also in your vocal tones. Am I yelling? If you're yelling, you're most likely excited or angry. There's a range. Also, we talk about understanding the causes and consequences of our emotions. So if I'm angry, why am I angry, and what happens when I'm angry? And then labeling emotions accurately. So are our students and are we using the correct emotion word to describe accurately how we're feeling? And what we experience as educators is we have students in the class who are demonstrating anger, which comes from a sense of injustice, but they tend to be feeling disappointed, which is there was a failed expectation that was met. Also expressing emotions in a way that's effective for your current context. So it's probably not the best thing to do to be laughing at a funeral in some cultures. Also in some cultures you can give someone eye contact to show respect. In other cultures you might look down. So just being aware also of the nuances of how other people express emotions. And then last and very importantly is what my colleague shared earlier, is this idea of regulating oneself. And as educators, we also can aid in co-regulating our student emotions. And so that's really what guides our work and our ruler approach to social and emotional learning. And we have 4 anchor tools that help educators and students develop the skills of emotional intelligence. And like the Mindful Schools folks, we also believe that it's important for adults to develop the skills of emotional intelligence, so they are the models for emotional intelligence for our students. So our first anchor tool, I'm just going to briefly go over them, is called the Emotional Intelligence Charter, which is all about creating that emotional safe climate. So it's a collective process with students and teachers who basically build a sort of contract on how we're going to be in the classroom so that we feel the way we want to feel. If a student wants to feel safe, inspired, excited, these are all words and feeling words that the teachers and the students come up with together. It's all about creating an emotional safe classroom climate. Our second anchor tool is the mood meter. You can see it's broken down into quadrants, and each quadrant represents different levels of pleasantness and energy, and represents different feelings. And this allows students to develop self and social awareness. But most importantly, I think this tool helps the permission for students to express how they're feeling. Because how often, if I remember when I was in school, did my teacher ask me how I was doing? And the third anchor tool is all about emotion regulation, really focusing on students developing their best selves and then behaving aligned with their best selves. And the last anchor tool is the tool I'll focus on today, which is all about building empathy and perspective taking and problem solving. So if we can go to, I'll do that. Okay, so now that, I don't know if you can see it that well back there. I didn't realize the room was going to be so big. But I talked about the ruler skills. So what happens is usually maybe before or after, during a conflict, you ask students to describe what happened in that situation. So oftentimes when I was a teacher, those conflicts happened at recess or at lunch, and the student would come and they would say, Ms. Simmons, so-and-so did this to me at lunch. And I would give them a sheet of paper and I would say, fill this out. This is what I learned at Institute. You know, you have the students reflect on their interaction. And that's where it stopped. I had the students reflect on their behavior. But what I love about the blueprint is that it went beyond the self. It went to the other person. So what we have students do is and it's developmentally, obviously in kindergarten you may talk the students through this process. If you have students who can't read yet, you could talk them through the process. You can do it in your head as an adult. And you can also have students write it down and then guide a conversation in terms of implementation. So the first line is focused on me. How did I feel in this particular situation? What caused my feelings? How did I express and regulate my feelings? And then last, there's a reflect and plan portion where we ask students, what could I have done to handle the situation better? What can I do now? So that's where the problem solving comes in. But then you go further and you ask them to think about another student. And so we have a story where we had two students, and there was a principal, he gave his students the sheet, right? He says, okay, I want you guys now to fill out this blueprint. And the students filling it out, and he went to his computer and he starts writing, and then the kids are starts whispering to each other, hey, how did you feel when I kicked you? And the other kid's I didn't kick you, I was trying to get the ball. And so what they realized during this process is that it was a misunderstanding. And so if you think about many of the interactions or unpleasant interactions our students have, it tends to be an emotional outburst that really derives from a misunderstanding and a lack of communication. And so this really helps open the the line of communication. And so what I'd like to do is just give you again, some of the basics of the blueprint. And it's a tool that can be used for something that happened. You could blueprint a past interaction, something that just happened in the present, or you're planning ahead. It also, like I said, builds empathy, compassion, you grow your interpersonal problem-solving skills, and you are working on listening and then question others. And what's important to know is that students may not resolve the problem at hand, but the point is really for students to behave in a way that's effective and compassionate. And you can integrate this into your behavior management tools, and if you've been doing what they've asked us to do at Institute, you may shift it and switch it out for this. It'll be a wonderful way to get students to think outside of themselves. So what I'd love to share with you in closing is a video. And we're all sitting in this room, and I don't want us to, forget that we're living in a specific context where we are experiencing racial unrest in our country. And so when I think about this specific outcome, that we have a teacher on this video sharing an outcome of the blueprint, that I really want us to always remember that education and health and all of these social also these social aspects are all related to where we are in society. I just wanted to close with this teacher who's sharing an outcome of having the students engage in a blueprint. Do you have sound?
And again, this is a tough kid, for an 8th grader, but he's a tough kid. And he says, something's really been bothering me, and I want to apologize to this other kid. The kid he wanted to apologize to is black, and he's white. And he said, I said something to you in 6th grade that was very racist, and it's been keeping me up at night. And I feel so badly about it. And as soon as he started saying it, the other kid started crying. And like they're looking at each other across the room, 2 boys that you would never, boys do not show their emotions like this, were like standing and talking to each other and crying at each other. And after he got his apology out, on their own accord, they stood up and hugged each other, like real hug, like strong. And then everybody's like, oh, they did it, it was great. I mean, that's definitely, that's a tangible thing, they had the courage to say that to each other.
And so just in closing, there's hope. And this is one tool that we can use to begin to truly see each other. And as you all go back to your classrooms, consider that this can not only be used for interpersonal skills, you can use this as a way to blueprint sort of the newspaper articles that we're seeing come and inundate us with, characters, character analysis, historical readings, etc. So there's hope. Let's continue on.
Thanks very much, Dina. And there, I hope you can see a great example of self and other, and thinking about your own feelings, thinking about the perspective of another person. Again, we have knowledge of a strategy is a piece, as well as labeling your emotions and being able to kind of evaluate how did that go and envisioning how did you want it to go. So lots of examples of those developmental experiences in there, and regulation being a part of that as well. And I really liked that little video clip at the end because it shows that if we provide these opportunities for kids to engage in just labeling, talking, describing, they're incredibly powerful, and they can be incredibly powerful just by taking the time to provide that opportunity. So.
Great, thank you, Camille. This has just been such an incredible panel so far, and I'm thinking back to my own educational experience and so desperately wish that I had these opportunities as a student, and that my son has these opportunities, so thank you. Looking at the framework, values is very prominently featured, and oftentimes schools are not the place where kids can both talk about their values and develop their values. And so I'm really excited to turn it over to Mr. Steve Becton, who will talk about how Facing History and Ourselves thinks about values.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I tell you, I am so excited that Teach for America is really being explicit about thinking about broader student outcomes. I think this is an area that you can be so impactful and so transformative in. So I'm so excited to know that. I know you've always cared about it, but to be this explicit about it, it is very exciting for me. This journey for me started with my 4th grade teacher. How many of y'all had that teacher that you say, this person must be crazy? You had the teacher? Some of you all are that teacher. But my 4th grade teacher, I talk about her all the time because she really understood this notion of broader student outcomes back when we really didn't have these frameworks to talk about it. But I grew up in the inner city community in Memphis, Tennessee, in a single parent home. And when I was in my school, my 4th grade teacher, the reason I thought she was crazy is because my mother did insist that I did my homework. But like most kids in my neighborhood, especially young black boys, it wasn't popular to do your homework. So I would roll it up and hide it in my jacket pocket. And when I gave it to this crazy teacher, she would tear it up because it was rolled up. She understood broader student outcomes. And she used to say to me, Steve, Becton, it's not enough to be smart, you have to be excellent. But the other thing that she used to say that just I think started me on this trajectory to thinking about my voice and my agency, she used to say that you have to be responsible to the world around you and to people around you. I'm in the 4th grade, that's pretty heavy. But she did, she said you have to be responsible to the people around you and the world around you. So Miss Curry started me on this trajectory. And I believe that seed she sowed, so what you're doing is so important. You're sowing seeds. You are somebody's Miss Curry. But I believe that seed that she sowed has me here today. Miss Curry really believed in this notion of broader student outcomes. And so Facing History in Ourselves, the organization I work for now, is committed to this idea that regardless of what zip code students live in, that they are moral philosophers, they are critical thinkers, and they make decisions every day that matters to the world around them. And so we thank you. So we use historical case studies and literature and primary source documents to help kids to think about moral decisions, moral dilemmas, critical thinking, but to do it in a very academic, rigorous way. That character ed and these questions should not be separate from academic rigor, but they should be grounded in academic, rigorous journeys. So this is what we do in Facing History. So I've been asked to reflect on values a little bit. We cut across most of the piece of this framework, but I want to think about this issue of values. What happens often, especially in neighborhoods where kids have been historically marginalized, is that we tell them what to value, even when that's in conflict with their own values. We tell them what to think, even if that's in conflict with their own thoughts. We tell them how to act, even if that action could actually be dangerous for them, because we don't think about their context. We tell them what to feel, even if their family feels totally different about what we're telling them. So at Facing History in Ourselves, we realize that's a deficit model approach, that we can't tell kids what to value, what to think, what to feel, and assume that we're right about it. But what we try to do in our work is to help kids uncover and discover their own value systems. We try to clarify values through tough thinking, through critical thinking, through rigor, through honoring the fact that they can co-construct knowledge with teachers, the kind of learning that we all enjoy. So I want to quickly turn this into a Facing History in Ourselves classroom. How do I get to the next slide? So I want to take you into one of the stories that we use to get to demonstrate how we approach this question of values and ethics with students. Let me give you the context really fast. This man that you're going to hear, this is a real story of a man that found himself in a subway station in New York in the 1950s, and he sees a white woman that needs some help. And he is a self-proclaimed Puerto Rican black man. He's trying to decide whether he should help this woman. And I want you to watch this couple of minutes of this clip, and I want you to think about what he's grappling with and whether you think he helped her or not. Is it?
You know, sometimes one thing happens to change your life. How you look at things, how you look at yourself. I remember one particular event. It was when, 1955, 56, a long time ago. Anyway, I'd been working at night. I wrote for the newspaper, and, you know, we had deadlines. It was late, after midnight, on the night before Memorial Day. I had to catch the train back to Brooklyn, the West Side IRT. This lady got onto the subway at 34th Street and Penn Station. A nice-looking white lady in her early 20s. Somehow, she managed to push herself in with a baby in her right arm and a big suitcase in her left hand. 2 children, a boy and a girl, about 3 and 5 years old, trailed after her. Anyway, at Nevin Street, I saw her preparing to get off at the next station, Atlantic Avenue. That's where I was getting off to. It was going to be a problem for her to get off. I mean, 2 small children, a baby in her arm, and a suitcase in her hand. And there I was, also preparing to get off at Atlantic Avenue. I couldn't help but imagine the steep, long concrete stairs going down to the Long Island Railroad and up to the street. Should I offer my help? Should I take care of the girl and the boy, take them by their hands until they reach the end of that steep, long concrete stairs? Courtesy is important to us Puerto Ricans. And here I was, hours past midnight, and the white lady with a baby in her arms.
Okay, Jesus is trying to decide whether to help her or not. What I want you to do is really quick, just turn to the person beside you. Based on what you heard so far, do you think he helped the woman or not? With the kids, the baby and all, do you think he helped her? Just talk to a person beside you for a quick minute. Do you think he helped her? I think I did what you told me not to.
Because I think it's very easy to overanalyze the situation, and then the situation passes. Like you're spending so much time trying to figure out whether or not you should do something,
Then you
and you don't.
Well, I think he was thinking about it, so then he probably did. Like, I don't know. I want to.
Yeah.
So I guess you're right. Because if he helped her, was he less than her? Right. Okay. Think about that context. I want to have faith that he did, but then I'm like, other part of me is like, why did he help?
Okay. How many of you all think he helped her? Just raise your hand. You think he helped her? Educators are so optimistic. It's great. How many of y'all think he did not help her? Wow. And how many of you are somewhere in the middle? Great. That's a great barometer. So what's important, though, is the questions that you raise right now. The kids love to say, yeah, I was right, you were wrong. But what's most important is the questions you raise. So here's some of the questions that we would raise. What social constructs and contexts are driving his decision? Right, that's important. Where he is, what's the social and the historical context of his decision? How is his own identity playing, what role is his own identity playing in his decision? How does the way he sees this woman, how is that playing in his decision, right? And then the question even for us is, what is our own identity, our own experience? What role is that playing right now in the way that we see his decision? These are the kind of questions that we raise with students to start thinking about values in this more deep critical thinking way, right? And then we ask them to imagine what would they do? And it becomes a very complex conversation where there are often not right or wrong answers. I think sometimes we're afraid to leave students with more questions than answers. We always want to leave them with an answer. Sometimes we need to leave them with more questions, right? So they can go and discover answers as they mature and grow. So let's see what Jesus did.
Or would she think worse? What do I do if she screamed when I went to offer my help? I hesitated. And then I pushed by her like I saw nothing, as if I were insensitive to her need. I was like a rude animal walking on two legs, just moving on, half running along the long subway platform, leaving the children and the suitcase and the woman with the baby in her arm. I ran up the steps of that long concrete stairs in twos, and when I reached the street, the cold air slapped my warm face. Perhaps the lady was not prejudiced after all. If you were not that prejudiced, I failed you, dear lady. If you were not that prejudiced, I failed you. I failed you too, children. I failed myself. I buried my courtesy early on Memorial Day morning. So here is the promise I made to myself back then. If I am ever faced with an occasion like that again, I am going to offer my help regardless of how the offer is going to be received. Then I will have my courtesy with me again.
So after the students turn to each other and say, see, I was wrong and you were right, you know, which they love to do, we can have some really thoughtful conversations now about values, right? About his dilemma and his values. A couple of things I just want to leave you with. One is that one of the things that comes out of this is that some language around human behavior, right? First of all, you're not stuck at your worst moment, right? Our students need to know this because they're going to make mistakes. Some Facing History use this language called bystanders and upstanders, right? And sometimes they're going to be bystanders. They're going to push on the way Jesus did. But if we help them be reflective about their choices, they can see themselves being upstanders. They'll get another chance. So we don't want to freeze them in their worst moments, right? Another thing that's important about this also is that they get to understand that throughout life they're going to be faced with these sort of ethical and moral dilemmas. That this is not just an adolescent thing. This is a lifelong experience. And students start to see themselves as a part of the larger context of the human experience. And I love Camille mentioned in the framework this notion of self, others, and world. Right? How do we have students in academic rigorous ways think about their responsibility to themselves, to others, and the world around them, and be transformative? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. What was so powerful to me about that is I really appreciated Steve's comments about we can't tell them how to think, how to feel, how to behave. And so when we're talking about developing all of the things in the framework, we're not talking about telling them what their mindsets ought to be, telling them what their values ought to be, telling them how they ought to behave and regulate themselves, but it's providing opportunities for them to encounter value situations, describe and evaluate those situations, and to think for themselves and develop within themselves what do they think and believe. And if it's not already really apparent to you, just that any of these things call on all of this. They call on mindsets, they call on knowledge and skills, they call on self-regulation, they call on values, and they're in the constant interaction of those things. So setting up experiences, those developmental experiences that allow young people to draw on and develop all of those pieces.
Hello? There we go, sorry. Thank you, and I will encourage you guys to take a look at the app again for the link to the resources, to the websites of these great partners. You're seeing one snippet of many resources that you all can bring back to your schools and nonprofits, and also continue to give us your comments and questions on the Twitter feed and through the texting as well. With that, we're going to transition to Dr. Calvin White from the Sovereign Navajo Nation, who's going to talk about research that's being conducted that affirms how truly infused curriculum is helping students develop an integrated identity and raises academic performance as well. Thank you.
My name is Calvin White, and I just made an introduction in a traditional Navajo way. And I was asked to sit on this panel. I don't know how to get to my slides, my friend. To talk about integrated identity. So I said, I sure can talk about that, but within 7 minutes, that's a pretty hard task. Because I was just telling my friend here, how many of you have Indian students in your class? Raise your hand high and proud. Okay. Good. How many of you work on Indian nations? There's a few handfuls. Good. Thank you for your work. Western education and Indian people have a very sensitive relationship. Very, very sensitive. And that falls under this integrated identity. And my friend here, I sent some slides here, so I'm going to share these slides with you. Just like I was telling my friend here, all these fine young ladies right here, they talk about emotional intelligence, mindfulness, all that. That's the source of our education. When did it become okay That's what we were practicing all this time in our storytelling, in our songs, and our chants. And I was just outside visiting a place teaching about global warming. I said, we had the first curriculum on global warming through our language and our culture and our songs. We had that. What happened? Well, what happened, like in our case, with the Net people, our first school, 1872, was inside a cavalry fort where they took our children and immersed them into education. Took them. How many of you are parents? How would you react if I came and took your kid and took him home with me? You didn't see him for 10 years. What would be your reaction? That's where I'm coming from. That's where we're coming from, Indian people. So from that, I attended a session over here, Faith and Education, faith-based education. I said, that's a whole Indian education, because the Presbyterian missionaries were contracted inside that fort to teach us about God and Holy Spirit and all that goes along with that. But we already knew that. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about something good. That's what I'm here to talk about. Right here, this integrated identity to empower the education is an issue of sovereignty. It's really, that's what I'm becoming to learn. I got my PhD. Can you believe that? After I was told by my teachers, you'll never make it past 12th grade. So that's how I was told once upon a time. But what I'm beginning to find out about the federal statutes, the state statutes, and now tribal law, tribal sovereignty, it's really about an issue of sovereignty. That's what I come to find out. Because right now, the Department of Education, who I work for, are saying, hey, you schools, you're not preparing our children well. Maybe you need to give them back to us. Maybe we need to start our own school, charter, tribal, however way we can define it, but we need to start that. Because you schools are not producing quality, educated Navajo youngsters. You're only concerned about them till age 18 once they graduate. If they're not prepared the way we want them to be, they suffer the longest day that they're going to live on this earth, you might say. So we're in the process of coming together as a group, using our mind and how do we put this education together that would be meaningful to our people, to the survival of our language and culture. We wrote this in an accountability plan. It's really interesting. I know all of you follow an accountability process and procedure plan that's state mandated because you get federal funds and you get others kind of state, you have to be accountable to your students, and you get funding for that. If you're in the public system, state system, I know that. Navajo, we wrote a plan. Can you believe that? We wrote the plan. Nobody, the U.S. Department of Ed said, hey, how can you write this plan? We have no part in the law where we can fit you in as a sovereign. A sovereign means like all you state public schools, the state you're in is a sovereign. Saw 50 sovereign entities in this great country of ours. Now an Indian tribe wrote that. How do they treat that? Really interesting. We're making history right now. You can read about it soon. They give us that piece of that sovereignty. We're going to implement what we see is beneficial to our students. We're still considered under the Department of Interior, Department of War, as renegades and savages and hedonistic people. Still there today, 21st century, and we're still considered that. So right here, you're looking at a savage. Look good. Right here, for your eyes, right here. Next slide, please. This is what we're working on, looking at all these things these fine young ladies talked about right here. Mental health, our home, our environment, our school, our cultural identity. Through how we were trained in Western education, how to think about education. This part are these traditional indicators on this side of academic achievement. They were producing results that were not really, that's documented in the research, that American Indian students are lowest performing, they're poor, they don't know how to behave, they know all this other stuff. But when we look on this side in the mental health piece, and when we integrate our tradition and culture, you know, those students succeed. We've had several what we call cultural camps. I'm just coming from one right now at Arizona State University, 150 teachers we're training how to integrate math and science from a cultural perspective. Us Native people, we have culture, we have science and math. We know how to do science and math. So we've been teaching these students how to integrate that, how to do it more on a hands-on application, teaching our teachers how to teach these students. A lot of TFA teachers come out to Indian reservations, Indian nations. So I got used to calling them Indian reservations. That was stamped in my head. Now it's the political correctness, Indian nations, but nations, still the same to me. That's where I'm coming from. So on this side of the equation here, how many are you familiar with structural equation modeling and statistics? Raise your hand high and proud. That's what this is built on, structural equation modeling. Hierarchical linear modeling. I think that's one of the very sophisticated steps in looking at data and achievement. And it makes sense. It makes sense to us. So when we take it to other of our peers at U.S. Department of Ed and Department of Interior, somehow it doesn't make sense to them. But based on the math principles, how can you debate that and argue that when it makes sense? So all these parts, mental health, home, environment, school, culture, when I said what I said in my language, that's what it captures. It captures that identity, piece of a student. I was so fortunate to have a really good grandfather, compassionate grandfather. When I was a young man, he said, "Grandson, you can go to that school building over there. Somewhere you can learn something. Never forget where you're coming from. You're already an intelligent young man. There's nobody in this world that thinks like you, that looks like you. There's nobody in there that has the heart and emotion like you. Use that, remember that. Don't ever let anybody tell you you're a stupid, crazy, backward Indian." I was very fortunate to have that kind of a person, my grandfather. Just think if your school kids came into your classroom, you said, "You're beautiful, you're intelligent, you can learn what I'm going to teach," what kind of impact that would have on them. So we're bringing that cultural component, that cultural identity into our system of education, and it's working very beautiful. And these kids are beginning to sense a purpose of why they're going to school. It's creating a purpose for them. Next slide, please. Oh, all right, go back. You cut my other slide out. But we did research on this. We did research with the University of Colorado. University of Colorado, through Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell, established the American Indian Alaska Native Research Center once upon a time. And we knew we were going to need their help. So we reached out to them. We tested this model right here through a hierarchical linear model. The number one factor that predicted student success was cultural identity. That was the number one factor in that all. Positive mental health, that's what was the second predictor. So given that, we're basing our approach to education based on those two factors to create this identity. So very happy to come here and share that with you. Very happy. You look like all those people that left, shame on them. Our elders tell us, when you get esteemed people like we have here, you sit still, listen. You might hear something you never heard before. You might see somebody you never seen before that's going to inspire your mind somehow, to make you move, make you do something better in your life. So God bless them wherever they went. I hope they hear this somewhere along the way. But I came here to share this piece of information with you. And the Navajo Nation, as a tribe, were those of you that were the biggest tribe in the country. Next to the Crees, when we put Crees and Navajos together, Crees, they go into Canada. But that's how we say it, my friend. The ne, not dying. The ne. But that's okay. That's all right. The ne, no ho ka di yin the ne. That's really who we are. That's who you are. No ho ka di yin the ne. That's who we are. No ho ka di yin the ne. When we tell our children, no ho ka di yin the ne ni gle. It's like each of you, you're a sacred person. You're sacred. You're full of that sacred spiritual energy. That's who you are. You have these 5 fingers. You have these 5 fingers to use them to work, to do something, help yourself. Don't be lazy. Don't make excuses. Get out there. You have a good mind. You have a plan. All this divine nature is formulated into a plan already for you. You have a family where you come from. In that family, there's a network, there's a structure that creates your identity. Use that, then you'll never go wrong. See, you're going to reach joy and happiness. Be happy, smile, share your smile with the world. Greet people, say, it's going to be all right, we're going to make it, let's go together. Don't criticize, that's our teaching, the neko. So I just wanted to share that with you again. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Calvin. And I'm not sure if everybody could see that, but in all of the various pieces around home, family, culture, that all the way through, it talked about knowledge and attitude. Yes, thank you. So knowledge and attitude, that those two things kind of together comprise our ability to move forward. And I just love no one can, we know that people can't move forward in a powerful way if you are torn within yourself, right? You can only bring half of what you know or what you value, who you are. And so I think that really super powerful way to illustrate that. So again, I hope that it's very clear that these things are always working in tandem. And we provide these opportunities in developmental experiences for people to act and reflect, and that is how we build these foundational components and build towards these foundations for young adult success.
Great, thank you so much for that. The last formal piece of this, we're going to talk back to the adults and the teachers, many of you in the room here today, about what it takes for you to have the social emotional care and development to unleash that energy of the child.
Hi, I'm Tish Jennings. Good to see you all here at the end of this program. How many people here are currently teachers in a classroom? Oh, awesome, awesome. Well, I was a teacher for a long time, 22 years, and my practice as a teacher began with a mindfulness practice. So I had already been practicing mindfulness before I became a teacher. But what I noticed once I started teaching, how many people here have a mindfulness practice, just out of curiosity? Oh, awesome. Well, what I noticed, and you might notice this too, from my own personal experience, was when I practiced regularly, my teaching practice really improved. And when I didn't practice regularly, I started feeling stressed out more often. I tended to take behaviors personally. Has anyone else ever had that experience? Have you noticed that? Yeah. Well, I became really curious about, oops, this got moved I became really curious about why that was. And this was I'm going back into the 80s, early 80s, when I started noticing this. And then I shifted my career and became a teacher educator. And during that time, I taught classroom management to elementary and preschool education teachers. And I also spent a lot of time observing classrooms because I was supervising internships. So for 15 years, I observed classrooms and I taught classroom management, and it became really clear to me that emotion reactivity interferes with classroom management. So what I mean by that is, you know when you start getting really stressed out when you're teaching? You lose your patience, you may not see what's happening clearly, and you might start feeling like it's pretty crazy. Has anyone ever felt this way? Overwhelmed, oh my gosh. What I love about this framework that we've been talking about is this is a lifelong learning process. You don't stop learning all these competencies at any point in your life. And what I realized is to be a teacher requires particularly skillful skills in social emotional competencies and cognitive competencies, because the context of the classroom is one of the most emotionally and cognitively demanding work contexts you can imagine. If you compare working in a classroom like this to sitting in an office, just think about that. Okay, just think about that for a moment. If I'm sitting in my office and somebody says something to me that is provocative, it gets me upset, right? I can say, oh, excuse me, I need to take a break. Talk to you later, right? If you're in your classroom and somebody does something that provokes an emotional response in you, you can't say, oh, sorry guys, I'll be back in a few minutes, right? You're stuck there. Not only are you stuck there, but your students are also stuck there. So, I mean, you're virtually captives in this environment that's incredibly cognitively and emotionally demanding. Why didn't anybody realize that this particular context needs maybe some extra skill set to deal with? In fact, Lee Shulman, who is a emeritus faculty at Stanford, through his whole career, he studied professional development. He looked at education, medicine, and engineering. And he said there's only one context in medicine that compares with the demands of being a classroom teacher. That is emergency room work. But look at the difference in the training that doctors get compared to what teachers get. So when I started realizing this, I thought, I really need to know more about emotional development in adulthood. I need to understand stress and coping and mindfulness and how all these pieces fit together. So I went back to graduate school at the University of California, Davis, and I got my doctorate in human development, focused on this stress and coping question. And then all these things became really obvious to me, why mindfulness was helpful and why the context was so challenging. So for the last decade or so, my colleagues and I have been developing a program called CARE for teachers. And this program is intentionally designed to support the particular social, emotional, and cognitive competencies that teachers need to be successful in that context. It combines emotion skills training with mindful awareness practices. And we've been studying this now in New York and in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We've had 2 large federally funded grants from the Department of Education. And our most current study has been taking place in New York City, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But I want to kind of go back and tell you a little bit about, I'm going to teach you one really simple way to help you manage yourself when you start feeling like this, okay? One thing I realized when I was observing classrooms, after I was done teaching, observing, I would often hear from a teacher or a student teacher that, oh, that class was crazy, I'm so sorry, it was just a bad day, oh, I'm so sorry. They would be embarrassed because I'd been watching them. And what I realized was, from my perspective, it didn't look crazy at all. That this imagined craziness is a result of feeling this stress. Because when you feel stressed out, it distorts your perceptions. It makes you think that things are worse than they are. It makes you imagine that that behavior of that student in that classroom is intentionally designed to make you crazy, right? So you forget, oh, they have regulation problems. It's hard for them to sit still. They're only 6. We forget that. Like, no, he's doing that to make me crazy. So we have to calm down because we can't think straight when we feel that way. And what are we modeling for our students when we act that way? Right? They're learning these competencies by watching us. So we need to be the best that we can be. So one of these very simple strategies that we've been teaching, I'm going to teach it to you. It's really simple. It's just taking 3 deep belly breaths. That's it. Really simple. You guys ready to try this? Okay, so again, most of you knew what to do. Assume the posture. You sit up. And in this exercise, sitting up is important because you're going to experience filling your lungs and using your diaphragm. Really fill your body with air deeply. If you want to, you can close your eyes. You can also put your hands on your abdomen if you want. And we're going to take 3 deep breaths at our own pace. But as you do that, I want you to notice the sensation of the breath filling your body and then leaving your body. So you can begin. And when you're done, just take a moment to check in and see how you're feeling now. I know I feel really different because often when I stand up in a place like this, I get nervous. And just taking those 3 breaths, I could feel myself, my anxiousness just go down. The tricky part of this exercise is remembering to do it and noticing when you need to do it. So one of the things we do in CARE is we help teachers recognize the signals of stress. For me, the first signal I feel is this. My shoulders creep up. Anybody else have that experience? I start finding myself like this. And as soon as I do, I think, oh, take a breath. Now, you don't have to close your eyes when you do that 3 breaths. You can do it at any time, whatever's going on. Nobody has to know you're doing it. You can also teach it to your students when your whole class needs to calm down. So this is a good takeaway for those times when you start noticing your stress level rising. I want to leave you with a little bit about the data from these studies that we've been doing. I'm really excited about this New York City study. We had 224 teachers randomly assigned to be in CARE, to be in a waitlist group, elementary teachers. And what's really exciting is not only did we show improvements in teachers' mindfulness, emotion regulation skills, and reductions in distress and reductions in something called timergency. Timergency is, I don't have enough time to do everything I have to do. Do you guys ever feel that way? Yeah, me too. So we reduced that, but the exciting part about this research is that we showed improvements in their classrooms, observable changes, improvements. So we showed improvements in positive climate. These are positive social interactions going on in the classroom. Teacher sensitivity to the needs of the students, and productivity. Really exciting outcomes. We have 5,000 students in this sample that we are still analyzing data from. So if we can show that helping teachers be more present, mindful, and aware, and modeling the behaviors that we've been talking about in these competencies, that their classrooms improve and their students improve, without teaching the kids any particular curriculum or anything, not changing that, just changing the teacher. It's pretty phenomenal. Finally, I just want to let you know about my book, Mindfulness for Teachers, because this CARE program, this is like a companion to the CARE program. It contains a lot of really important information about emotions, about mindfulness, and about how to apply this emotional skills training and mindfulness to improving your classroom. So thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate your attention.
Thanks so much. much, Tish. Even though I am no longer a classroom teacher, as a parent, I need to do what you were talking about. So now I would love to turn it over to Amelia Martin, who is a 2012 Massachusetts Corps member and a 7th grade language arts teacher from Neighborhood House Charter School in Boston. And she's going to tell us a little bit about how she is trying to implement some of these practices in her school.
Hi everyone. As you said, I'm Amelia Martin. I'm a 7th grade English teacher up in Boston, and I consider myself very fortunate to be at a school where social emotional learning is really, really highly valued. Across our school, which is a K-8, we value that in every classroom, every day of the year. And so kind of what that looks like from the broad overview is just, our school believes foundationally that social emotional learning is important to helping kids overcome obstacles on the path to life success, be that personal or academic. And so what that looks like practically is kind of threefold. So first is we believe that there's data on this and that we need to access that. So we're partnered with an organization called PAIR, which is the Partnership in Education and After School Resiliency. We call it PAIR. And basically, kids take baseline assessments at the beginning of the year where we ask them 62 really personal questions that cover everything from I feel safe when I'm at school to I have positive adults or positive relationships with adults to I believe I can and will be successful. Based on that, we get individualized dashboards for each student that has information on all of those different realms that teachers then have access to make decisions about groupings, about interventions, about where a kid's going to sit in the cafeteria. And so we use that on a variety of levels to sort of tap into our students' strengths as we use those to overcome their struggles. And then a second component is education. We believe that kids need to be educated on issues of social emotional learning. So beginning in our K-1 classrooms straight through 8th grade, we have dedicated classes either once a week for half the year or 3 times a week for like 5 or 6 week sessions that range on a variety of topics from knowing themselves to learning how to interact in the world to learning how to interact in their neighborhood context. And those are groups that are facilitated by full-time staff at the school, social workers, psychologists, people who are really trained in group facilitation theory. They're small groups, they're responsive, they're focused. And then I think the third umbrella refers to those students that need a little bit more. We recognize that not every kid comes to school with the same needs and that we need to meet them where they're at. And we fight like hell to not give up on kids. And so we think that that involves creativity, it involves responsiveness, it involves doing whatever it takes to keep kids stable and learning. And so as a 7th grade English language arts teacher, I'm not the one who designs these programs, I'm the one who implements them, who uses them in my classroom. And it takes a little bit of work to analyze that data, but I do find that when you do kind of dig into those dashboards and dig into their strengths and their successes, that really all of my kids, even the ones that are tapping the pencils and carving the desks and making me sometimes pull out a career change, are really capable of so much, and that each and every one of them has strengths. So that's a little bit about what we're doing up at Neighborhood House.
Okay, so we are coming to the end of our time and really appreciate all the questions and comments that have come on through Twitter and the text area. We're going to invite folks to, when we formally close, come up and ask your questions of any of the panelists that you have specifically. But there is one question and topic that we did get a lot of traction on, and that was the question of how would some of this apply perhaps to students with special needs. And so I don't know if there's one or two of you who want to just quickly take that on, and then we'll formally close.
Hi, so Mindful Schools works a lot in classes where students with special needs have been pushed in, as well as in classes where students have identified needs and they've been pulled out. And one of the things that we do is we teach all of the social workers and implementation people who are doing it tiered interventions to know exactly what's happening in each one of the classrooms in terms of the mindfulness practices, so that we use a language that feels familiar to all students. And that's one of the strengths of working and collaborating as a mindfulness coach or instructor, a classroom teacher who's been educated in mindfulness within the school, is those strong collaborations with whoever is the instructional coach. We make sure that they also understand how we're doing this, and we encourage them to use it in interventions. A lot of the times what happens for us is that we have to, and have the pleasure of, modifying our practices to work with our students as they are capable. So for instance, in one of the classrooms that I wrote about recently on the Mindful Schools graduate school blogs, these are autistic students who got a grant, and they're using a biofeedback mechanism to actually teach themselves what calm feels like and what a mindful breath looks like. So they're following the data on their little devices. And what we've discovered is that if you can teach children, regardless of what their abilities are, to access that baseline sense of this is myself and this is what I feel like, then they're much more able to learn and to participate in the classroom. So I'm happy to answer more questions about that if you all want to come up afterwards. Thanks.
Great. And last word, Stephen?
Just a quick reflection on that. I think, especially when working with students with special needs, it's the classroom climate and the classroom environment is so critical for all classes, but especially here. So we do some very intentional work about creating safe, reflective classroom space that I would love to share with you, or you can email me and I'll tell you more about it. But the classroom space and the classroom environment, I think, is a great starting point, even before you get to cognitive things and to content.
So here's the contact information for our group. Sorry. All right, we're going to switch. So here's the contact information for our great panelists, and if you want, for Lindsay and me. We invite you to continue this conversation both by coming up now or by reaching out via email. Thank you so much to our panelists for being so accessible, both in the room today and going forward. And another thing I'll just say before passing it back to Lindsay is, we really do feel, as people who get to work in this field on a daily basis, that there is a movement that is talking about how these broader student outcomes, inclusive of academics, come together. And you all are the ones on the ground making that implementation happen. And I know that I can speak for both of our foundations and the organizations that are here. We just want to know what it will take to give you the resources, tools, and support you need to be at the front of that movement. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for coming. I think the only other thing I would add in closing is that a classroom, a school, a community where this framework is alive in classrooms for our kids is a system then that is fulfilling the promise of education, that is helping build human beings who are loved and known and proud and confident and can actually change our world. So again, thank you so much for your interest. Thank you for coming, and please come up and ask all your questions to our panelists.